Your son, he's gone. He was weak and foolish, like his father. So I destroyed him.
Are you done with film?
Don't hold me to it, Keanu, but I think I am.
We are going through a very significant and large transition in cinema. And the digital process democratizes the whole thing.
I think without digital video, I don't think I ever would have been making movies. Basically, in my head, I was like, you've got to be like a dude who knows how to operate machines to do this job.
I'm always looking for whatever is new to help just push the art form even further. To be able to make the things that you couldn't envision the day before.
There isn't yet a superior or even an equal imaging technology to film, but we're being forced into transition.
You can't shoot 3D on film. So film has been dead in my heart for 10 years.
I hate 3D. I put on those glasses, I get sick to my stomach. The whole 3D phenomenon, it's a marketing scheme, isn't it?
I really felt I should call film on the phone and say I've met someone, because I really thought, okay, this is the future.
The issue is it's different. How is it different, and how do you use it to tell a story? It's up to the filmmaker.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Weak and Foolish Movie Podcast. My name is Mike Tang, and with me is
Job Eng.
We hope you all are doing okay during these unprecedented times in our world. There's certainly a lot of anxiety and fear permeating across the globe over the spread of the coronavirus. Hopefully you all are doing your best in socially distancing yourselves from others and the public. Job, how have you been faring in the COVID-19 era? What kind of things have you been up to?
Yeah, well, first off, I want to echo that. Please do your part to stay home. Still seeing a lot of people who aren't. So if that's you, I would just gently urge you to stay home and do your part to make this go away so that we can have movies to talk about again. But yeah, it's been good. I mean, where I work is a church, so we are actually pretty busy during the week putting together the streams. We've been live streaming our services and meeting over Zoom. I'm sure many of us are on Zoom these days, and Zoom's probably making good business. One of maybe the only companies that is probably growing at this time. But yeah, it's been good. It's been interesting to adjust to a new normal of getting out of bed and going to work, working from home. But I've honestly enjoyed this time too, in that there's some more time for quiet reflection, and I just feel like our day-to-day world has been so fast and busy these days that something like this is kind of a welcome thing. I guess if we're looking at for positives in a global pandemic, then this is what I find is the positive in all of this. But how are you doing, man?
It's definitely very interesting seeing everything shut down. I have 2 kids, so we don't really stay inside the house all the time. I would say a majority of the day, probably like 85% of the day, we're at home. But in the late afternoon, we usually go out for a walk somewhere, and we see other people walking, but everyone's trying to maintain distance from each other, aside from like families who obviously live together. So I think that part is kind of encouraging to see. I'm still working also, like you. I'm working from home technically, but it's hard to get stuff done in my house because of the 2 little kids. So I actually have been going back to my school site to work, but thankfully no one's there, so I don't really interact with any other people. I don't see any other people, and I have just like a quiet space in the morning to get as much work as I can done. And I'm just kind of like on standby in the afternoon, checking my emails, sending messages to students and whatnot. And I totally agree with you. Like, life does slow down, and because everyone's working at home, we see our families like way more. Like I'm definitely seeing way more of my kids than I was when I was working. Yeah. And so that's been like a lot of fun, but also very tiring at the same time. Like I keep telling my wife, Like, this would have been a lot easier, I think, had this had happened like 3 or 4 years ago before we had kids, because we had so much more downtime. But most of the day is actually spent either working or like watching our kids and trying to keep them alive. So
Yeah.
So in terms of our like how much downtime we have is probably about the same as before COVID-19.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But all right, let's get on with this episode. So we actually won't be discussing any new film because, as you all know, all the theaters have been shut down. Instead, we're going to discuss an issue among cinephiles, which is the debate between the use of film and digital. You must be thinking, what a random topic to all of a sudden talk about. There's a bunch of movies and TV shows on streaming that could be discussed. So basically what happened was Job texted me last week telling me that he actually watched the 4K UHD Blu-ray of The Matrix. And he praised it for the aesthetics of the transfer. And I personally couldn't believe it. The Matrix is my favorite film of all time. I've seen it dozens of times. I personally really don't like the 4K transfer of the movie because it looks nothing like the movie I saw in theaters and on DVD and Blu-ray. So we got into a huge debate on this issue, and if you've listened to this podcast at all, you'd know that we pretty much agree on everything about movies, like literally everything. If you listen to the other 17 episodes of this podcast, we generally like the movies or we don't like the movie. There's no like in between for us. So halfway into our text debate, I thought, hey, this would actually be a great idea for a podcast episode where we finally discuss something that we don't agree on. So film versus digital. Job, why don't you give us a little bit of background on this debate?
Yeah, so film versus digital. There's quite before we can launch into kind of a meaningful discussion on this sort of thing, there's quite a few things we need to distinguish before we can make quote unquote informed discussion. So first of all, we're not experts. We've never shot with film, and it's going to be hard to speak exactly to the precision of making a film with film. But we are going to discuss briefly how it is made and also what, if any, differences there are in a movie that's shot on film and one that is shot on digital. So films that are shot on film, meaning the celluloid, the physical object of film, they go through a process these days of digitizing. So the filmed image gets edited in Premiere or Avid or whatever it is you edit in these days. But they first get digitized into what's called a digital intermediate. What that means is it's just simply the digitized version of the film strip. But before that, before we entered the world of editing on computers, film was color timed photochemically, which means old school, like in the lab. You take it in the lab or the dark room and you photochemically develop the film for editing. Of the remaining film truthers out there, which there are many, J.J. Abrams still shoots all his movies on film. I think Christopher McQuarrie shoots all his stuff on film still. But the godfather of them all is Christopher Nolan, who is probably the only filmmaker left who still photochemically times his movies, at least major filmmakers. This results in less manipulation of the filmed image, and it also results in a higher film resolution because you're color timing the negative itself and then spitting it out in full resolution instead of in full resolution and then you're editing color timing after. It's kind of a big old process. Sometimes Nolan still edits the films the old-fashioned way, even through using the negative, which is just crazy to me. I can't, you and I probably have never even seen or been close to editing a film with the actual film negative, like cutting it and splicing it together. So that just blows my mind that's still a thing.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It's like he's still doing it like it's the 1960s.
Yeah, yeah. So that's pretty insane. And I just want to conclude this segment with a quote from Nolan. He says, "I am not committed to film out of nostalgia. I am in favor of any kind of technical innovation, but it needs to exceed what has gone before, and so far nothing has exceeded anything that's come before." So basically he thinks that the industry continues to move towards the digital space, not because of artistic reasons or because the capture format is better than film, but because it costs less.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, thanks for giving us the background on actually how the film celluloid is actually scanned digitally, and
Yeah.
that's how it's edited on computers. For me, I think the first word that comes to mind when I think of movies shot on film is romantic. Think back to like an old photograph, right, where the darker areas in the picture aren't completely black. There's gradations in the shadows and the blacks. And there's just something about the overall image that kind of looks fuzzier than digital photos we see now, like shot with our iPhones or with the DSLR. And I think there's a reason why Polaroid cameras have made a comeback recently, and why Instagram has a bunch of filters you can apply to make your pictures look like they were taken in the 1960s. I think there's a fascination with capturing images that look like dreams or memories. There's some kind of nostalgic factor in that. I know Christopher Nolan says he's not committed to shoot his movies on film out of nostalgia, but I personally feel like as an audience member, it kind of elicits that kind of emotion.
Yep. So good.
I remember watching Mission Impossible Fallout and just gushing over that Paris car chase sequence. Like I felt like I was watching a 1970s action film, like The French Connection. Like the use of film in that sequence, it works so well with a location like Paris, which is inherently such a classically cinematic metropolis. It was just it was like one of the best looking and best cut together action sequences I've ever seen in a movie, and I think part of it has to do with the fact that the way it was shot. Some notable films for those of you who aren't familiar with movies that came out that are shot on film. Some movies that came out in 2019 that were shot on film were The Irishman, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, Uncut Gems, Little Women, The Lighthouse, Marriage Story, and Ad Astra. Some of these I was actually very surprised by, like Marriage Story. I didn't know that was shot on film. I don't think I was paying. Yeah. Maybe I wasn't paying attention, or I don't remember as well. But I think definitely the other films, there's definitely a quality about the images that seem very filmic. The kind of the like I kind of mentioned before. It's not as crisp and sharp as digital movies.
There's a softness inherent to the image.
Yes.
That's not like, there's a razor sharpness to digital. I think we're going to talk about that a little later. There's a kind of a razor sharpness to digital because of the nature of how cameras are manufactured. But when you capture it onto a physical piece of celluloid, there is something a little different. There's an inherent softness to it, but also the light is captured in a way that you can really only replicate in film, or so we think.
Right. All right. So that's film. Why don't you tell us a little bit about digital?
Yeah. So, I was kind of segueing towards that, but digital, as we all know, we all have shot digitally. Every single one of us who owns a smartphone or has ever worked with a camcorder in the last 10 years. We're all digital shooters. Our phones capture digitally, obviously. If you have a Canon DSLR within the last decade or a decade and a half, you've shot digitally. We live in a digital world, and one of the big digital cameras that kind of changed the industry in recent memory I can think of is the Alexa, which I believe...
Arri Alexa.
Yeah, the Arri Alexa, which I believe for The Revenant was the big movie. It was a big coming out party for the Alexa, was The Revenant, because Inarritu shot it without any set lighting at all, and the image was just beautiful and captured all the detail that you could. So digital has gotten to the point where modern camera sensors are able to do a lot of what film historically could do in terms of capturing dynamic range and such. However, on the opposite end of Nolan's thing is Steve Yedlin, who is the longtime director of photography and the cinematographer for Rian Johnson. He's a big lover of celluloid shooting, is Rian Johnson. And we all know who Rian Johnson. He just did The Last Jedi. He did Knives Out, Looper, Brothers Bloom, a bunch of great movies. And he has shot almost all his movies on film. But Steve Yedlin, his cinematographer, is actually a big proponent of pushing the science of digital photography to achieve whatever it is you want. So before we get too nerdy about this, let me just try to summarize this as best as I can. In his opinion, technology has reached the point where the digital look that everyone criticizes, or like, we just described it, it's razor sharp, it's not as soft, is something that isn't so much because of what's called capture format. So if in this case we're talking about the camera, so it's a capture format, the digital camera. And within a digital camera, there are mathematical equations that exist within the camera's factory settings, which cause the image to look a certain way. If you're talking about digital, it's a computer algorithm that creates the image that you're seeing. So his thing is, if you change the math, then you can change how the image looks. So he's actually done a lot of film nerdy presentations on his website that show the difference between a filmed image and a digital image. And essentially, he's been able to achieve the look of film, the one we're talking about, like a softer image, a lot of film grain, even down to the halo effect, or what's called halation, that kind of like halos an object if you put it up against a strong backlight. One classical filmmaker, film cinematographer I can think of who does that a lot is Janusz Kaminski, Steven Spielberg's DP, who loves to use the backlight to achieve that halo effect. But Yedlin, going back to Yedlin, he's able to capture that by just manipulating algorithms and digital capture math to make it look that way. And I've actually personally seen the rise of this, because when I was in college, I shot and learned photography on Canon DSLR, so they were digital cameras. And a friend of mine would actually experiment with an LUT, or lookup table, which is like the mathematics within the camera. It would take all the RGB color information that's coming in through the sensor, and it would tweak it. So it's this nerdy math thing that kind of comes through here. So because when you shot with Canon back in the day, you were getting a certain look to your images. People could tell that you shot with a Canon camera. And if you were shooting with Nikon, same thing. So this takes all of that out of the equation. Instead, you define the look and you call the shot. Just the camera, it's just your tool. It's not so much, it doesn't determine what the look of the image is now. I think it's pretty genius, actually. I thought for sure on some of Rian Johnson's later projects, namely a music video he did for LCD Sound System, as well as Knives Out, I thought for sure they were captured on film because of how it looked. And even The Last Jedi, I thought was completely film, but actually, according to an article on Polygon, it was revealed that 50% of The Last Jedi was also digital. But you can't tell. It's amazing. You just simply cannot tell. I was mind blown when I found that out. Yedlin calls The Last Jedi the biggest prep demo of all time to kind of show that you could do this. He couldn't really name which scenes. He himself couldn't even name which scenes were digital and which were film because of how indistinguishable it is. which is just a marvel of it all. The main point of all of this is he's offering a way out of the whole film versus digital debate. It's not so much if you capture something on celluloid, it'll look a certain way, but if it's on digital, it'll look a different way. If you manipulate the math enough, according to him, then you can make the choice yourself. The medium does not define the look, which is a fascinating wrinkle in this debate. So I'll kind of stop talking, but I want to hear what you're thinking on that, Mike.
Yeah, I think almost everyone who has ever tried to make a short film, like around our age, they've shot it digitally, right? It's by far, like you said, way cheaper than film. It's far easier to film with for beginners, and it's more accessible, right? Like, where can you find film these days, right? You have to go to like specialty locations in order to access film. I personally started shooting videos and short films in 2011 with the Canon T2i, which is kind of like an entry camera. And then I upgraded to a Canon 5D Mark III in 2013. The unfortunate thing about these consumer cameras is that the videos are compressed, so the file sizes can remain manageable, right? You don't want to have like 20 gig video clips. So when videos are compressed, there's actually a lot of data that's lost in the image. So as a result, it's kind of difficult to color grade the image in a way that looks natural. Oftentimes the color grading looks forced into the image. It's kind of like, you make it too saturated or the shadows are too blue. I found it to be really hard to make it look like right. I wasn't very good at color coding like those compressed videos. However, there was a hack into the 5D Mark III that gave consumers, for the first time, raw video, which is uncompressed video. And basically you get all the data that's there in the image that's captured. So it was exhilarating to shoot with raw video because it suddenly gave you the ability to shape the picture to exactly what you wanted, which is what you just talked about. And I think this is the power of digital video, right? You can make it whatever you want to be, And to add to your points, Job, about digital filmmaking, I think the benefit of shooting movies digitally is that you can shoot uninterrupted for longer periods of time. So this plays into like actors, right? Actors who are trying to give a performance, they can stay in the zone. When you're shooting with film, there's a roll that's being used up as you're shooting.
That's right.
And so once the roll of film is finished, they have to pause the shoot, and then they have to load in the new film canisters. So this breaks up the momentum that the actors have worked up in the scene. With digital, you can just keep filming because there's nothing to switch out. There's just battery packs or like memory cards that you can swap in and out. But those things have a huge capacity for that. Sorry, I think I was going to say something else, but never mind. But pretty much, pretty much all films these days are shot digitally. Here's some notable ones: Black Panther, Bohemian Rhapsody, Avengers Endgame, 1917, and some absolutely gorgeous digital films that have a filmic quality, but you can still tell it's digital because of the crispness of the image. But Moonlight and If Beale Street Could Talk, the two Barry Jenkins movies, just like stunning to look at, but they're digital images. So I think those films really pushed like the beauty of of digital filmmaking.
Well said. Yeah, that list of notable films that are shot digitally could easily go way, 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 way longer because it's becoming the dominant capture format for sure.
Yeah, right. I mean, I just wanted to list movies that came out within like the last year or two.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But definitely there have been like other amazing films like earlier in the 2010s that were shot digitally. But yeah, anyways. Do you have any?
So I wanted to kind of say, oh, go ahead. Yeah, I was going to say, I was going to say, what then is the look, right? Because we're talking about these major blockbusters, Marvel, Black Panther movies, Bohemian Rhapsody, 1917. what is the look of that compared to the look that you would get on film? So I've seen more than just Knives Out, which is a completely digital movie that was manipulated to look like film. What is the filmic look, right, when we're talking about it? Is it grain that's kind of artificially applied to the image to make it look like it's film? Is it the color? Is it what is it? You know, is it the wider color gamut? Is it determined by us? I guess, you know, a lot of times I hear the word filmic, but in my opinion, it could mean something, and then to someone else, it could mean an entirely different thing. So, what do you think, Mike, is filmic, if we're talking about it now, or has that changed? You know, like is it not the standard like film grain dancing around and deep blacks and all that stuff? You know, what is the look of film?
I think it's like what we kind of mentioned before, right? Like there's just a fuzziness to the image that I think most digital films don't have. Like there are some films that are obviously digital, right? Like Blade Runner 2049. That's a very digital looking movie.
Yes.
Drive, or any movie by Nicholas Winding Refn, Drive, Neon Demon, Only God Forgives. Those are very digital looking films. It just looks crisp. It looks like it just looks razor sharp, I guess. I have no other adjectives to use for it.
Yeah.
I mean, film is just, it's just not as, I feel like it's not an exact science like how digital is.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, it looks like it's more freeing, I guess, to the eyes in terms of like how the image looks and the emotion that it elicits. But I think in the end, you know, these are just tools for filmmakers to use to kind of tell their stories, right? Like for example, I think of Alfonso Cuarón with Roma. He shot that movie in black and white, but in digital. And he purposely did this, even though it's a period film, right? It took place, I forgot, like in the 1970s or something, or 1980s. But
right.
it takes place in the past. It's a period film. But he chose to shoot it digitally because he's kind of reflecting back on his childhood in Mexico with the clarity that he has now as an adult. So he purposely shot it in digital, but in black and white, because it is a memory that he's looking back on. So I think that's an example of just how, like, this is a filmmaker. He could have shot on any platform he wanted, but he chose this specific method, black and white digital, because of the kind of story he wanted to tell.
Yeah.
Same with Mission Impossible Fallout, right? Like that Paris chase sequence could have easily been shot on digital, but I mean, Macquarie went for film, and it gave it another layer of emotion that I think maybe the movie would not have had if it was shot digitally.
So let me ask you this. Do you think that we as human beings can tell when something is physical and when something is digital? And so I mean, we could go to the obvious debate of CGI human beings, right? We can still tell as humans there's just something in us that is telling us this information is not authentic or real. In the same way, when we see something that's shot on film, are we reacting to the fact that it's an image that's printed onto obviously we're watching a digital representation of it, but we are seeing this image was initially captured with a piece of film, like an actual physical capture. Do you think that is something we can tell or not? Because obviously we get fooled sometimes, but is there something in us that evokes emotion because of that fact? I guess, does it fall into that category of like something that's uncanny that we can just kind of feel?
I mean, to be honest, like a couple of years ago, I couldn't even tell the difference between film and digital. So it's only until I started paying a little bit more attention and just reading more about it and kind of analyzing the images that I'm seeing until I could tell the difference. I think most people can't really tell the difference. And I think the images, whether it's film or digital, for I think almost like I would say 98% of people who watch movies, right? I don't think they can tell the difference. Like your wife, my wife, they're not as like nerdy about films, as we are. So I think these non-film nerds, they're not. I don't think they're as. I don't know. They're not looking for it, so I don't think it affects them in the same way.
Interesting.
But I think like for my wife though, like I have started pointing out certain things to her, like look, like, and because my wife is or has gotten into photography and she's editing photos, like she's seeing a lot of these digital images. So I think when she sees stuff shot on film, she does notice when I point it out, or sometimes she'll ask me like, "Oh, was this shot on film?" So I think it's possible to train our eyes to kind of tell the difference. And I think when you do, I feel like when you do that, I think it does open up another aspect about the movie that wouldn't be accessible if you hadn't like kind of studied on it or you looked into it.
That is true, because I remember when with Tron Legacy, right? When the actor is
Garrett. Are you talking about Jeff Bridges?
Yeah, the de-aged Jeff Bridges' character.
Bridges,
when he was de-aged, right? When I was in high school / college, I hadn't watched nearly as many films as I have now. I didn't know that was like a digital image. I know it's funny now looking back, because it's like,
right,
man, it's pasty, but at the time, if you're not looking for it, you just don't know. Like, I remember going to the theaters to watch Rogue One, and there's the young CGI version of Grand Moff Tarkin, right?
Yeah.
And one of my friends, who I will not name, like leaned over, is like, "Wait, that guy it's the same guy? Like, I thought he must be so old by now." And I was like, "That's amazing. Like, if you just don't know and you're not looking for it, it could just pass you by."
Yeah.
So maybe it's the same thing with film, which maybe is why there's such a huge move towards digital, because people don't really care. In fact, some people probably prefer it. Maybe nowadays they see an actual filmic transfer of a movie that's shot on film. It's like, why is it so grainy?
Yeah,
I've definitely heard that before.
Can you imagine? Like you said before, shooting digitally, it's not only like people can't tell the difference, but right. So, like for a movie like The Revenant, right? Why would you want to go into the wild like that and under these extreme conditions and shoot with film? That's like a lot harder to do in those temperatures and in those weather conditions, right? When you can shoot with a digital camera, right? That's so much easier to kind of lug around and I don't I haven't shot with either on location or anything like that. So I want to know. I'm just wondering, like, I guess for professional filmmakers, like for a movie like that, why would you shoot on film if one, the audience can't tell the difference, and two, like it's just so much harder to do it on film.
Yeah. Another thing is we live in a CGI world, and so a lot of those effects, if you shoot on film, have to get rendered to look filmic too. So are you applying like digital grain to those? I actually am curious about that, and I wish I read a little more into it, but it's like, yeah, like if J.J. Abrams has shot The Rise of Skywalker on film, right? Like all those CGI elements also look like they were shot on film. How do you do that? Do you put it on the digital intermediate and then print it back out onto another film strip so it looks like, like it's just so fascinating to think about how they achieved that look. And I'm guessing it's just another level of complexity that it gets added to their filmmaking process. Yeah, like a film like The Revenant shot on location is not going to happen if he had to lug giant IMAX cameras. I don't care if you're Christopher Nolan. That's like incredibly hard to do. And I don't think Nolan and his DP could have pulled that one off with the big IMAX cameras too,
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Well, though, have you seen the behind the scenes of Dunkirk?
I have. They did. Yeah.
It's kind of insane. Like they're swimming in the water with an IMAX camera. Yeah. So I mean, it's possible, I guess, but it's so hard. It's such a crazy task. Yeah. I don't know, but these are artists at the top of their game. So
yeah,
I mean, I think to them it's not a big deal. Like they're willing to endure all that just to get the kind of footage and the kind of shots that they want with these amazing cameras.
True.
Yeah,
True.
And to be honest, I think it was worth it for a movie like Dunkirk because it's just stunning to look at. Like,
yeah,
they were shooting that movie with an IMAX camera, but treating it like it was a GoPro.
Oh, I know.
They were doing these like POV shots with an IMAX camera that, they're like dragging a guy on a stretcher, and the IMAX camera is like upside down on the stretcher, looking up at all the people that's passing by. It's like insane.
Yeah, how do you even do that? Like,
yeah,
I can't even picture that.
Yeah,
but I mean, maybe we could talk briefly about like what kind of give a picture of what filmmakers are for which, and then we can go beyond that.
Yeah, so some notable filmmakers who are in favor of abandoning film and just shooting digitally is there's a list: David Fincher, David Lynch, Robert Rodriguez, George Lucas, obviously, James Cameron. And their main criticism of film is that it's already peaked as a technology and it cannot improve. But digital is always improving, with cameras and sensors getting so advanced every year that it's only a matter of time that it can create images like the ones shot in celluloid. And like what you mentioned about Knives Out and the experiment that they kind of did with that film. Like, it's getting so close that people can't tell the difference. And even the math on that is actually, like objectively very close to film.
Right.
And then on the other side, there's filmmakers who are in favor of shooting exclusively on film. Christopher Nolan, Quentin Tarantino, Martin Scorsese, Guillermo del Toro, Richard Linklater. And I think I heard Tarantino say once that the beauty of cinema is that it's an illusion. You think you're watching moving images when in fact you're just watching 24 images per second. And he's referring to the standard 24 frames per second frame rate in movies. And that's one of the aspects of film that makes cinema magical. With digital, you lose that illusion. And Tarantino called it watching TV in public.
Ouch.
Yeah. And, one thing that Christopher Nolan says is proponents of digital filmmaking, like they say, like, you know exactly where you're getting when you're on the shoot, right? Because you have all the footage that you just shot playing on a big screen like TV, that they can kind of critique the image that they're getting, and they can make adjustments while they're on set or on location. But Christopher Nolan says to that, like, well, you're fooling yourself because like the audience is going to be seeing it on something that's like 50 times larger than that little TV that you're looking at. So, it's just like an endless debate between, these two camps, but, it's entertaining. Sure. In the end, there's a wonderful documentary by Keanu Reeves on digital versus film. It's called Side by Side. It's free. You can watch it on Vudu and on Tubi, Tubi. These are two free.
And Amazon Prime too. Sorry.
Is it free on Amazon Prime? Because I think I checked. Oh, okay.
I just noted. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's fine. But yeah, this is a great documentary on this subject that really dives deep and gives you a lot of examples of film and digital. You hear from all these filmmakers that I listed. You hear from all the DPs, the director of photography or cinematographers. They all weigh in on this issue. Yeah, so I don't know. Do you have anything else to add before we move on to the main debate?
Ooh, the main debate. I will just say I still prefer. I think I'm an old soul at heart. I still love to know when a film was shot on a film that there was a discipline, quote unquote, to the way the film was created, in that they were working with a finite resource, which is a roll of film. and that they took the time to develop it and get it sent to a lab, and there's just something truly nostalgic and romantic about it. And as I did put Knives Out on the 4K Blu-ray of it on the other day, and knowing that it was shot on digital, I could start to see like the digital elements of it. Some of it just was not nearly as crisp, or like, not crisp, that's the wrong word, we've been using crisp a lot today. But it's not nearly the same. You can actually start to tell the illusion starts to break down a little bit. But you put on something like In the Mood for Love, by Wong Kar-wai, shot back in the 2000s or late 90s, whenever it was shot, and there's a filmicness to the image that feels real. It feels tactile. Feels like you're projecting it onto your TV still in some way. It's not going to look the same as when we were kids in theaters, where a 35 millimeter reel is being projected onto the screen and you're seeing the flies like flying across the projector or like little specks of dust on it. But it's as close as we can still get. And I think in a way I like the idea that a format that we watched in childhood is still around. And I love that Christopher Nolan, who's basically like the auteur filmmaker of our generation, right, is still a huge proponent of it. And I love that even a guy like J.J. Abrams, who spits out projects like the chewing gum that he finished at the end of the day, is like he still shoots on film too. And I just love that. And to put it super elegantly, I saw another quote that I wasn't sure I was going to include, but Christopher Nolan just said that film has balls. That's it? No, I'm just kidding. There's something to it. It just feels like it's more raw, it's more intimate. It's got something real, rooted in the real world in it, that we haven't been able to see achieved yet in digital. And I guess that's why I kind of also brought that up, is like, can we tell, like, in our souls, not to get all woo woo on us here in this super serious movie podcast, but like, is there something in us that can tell when something's real? And I don't know. So that's kind of what I think on it.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think in the end, for me, it just like, I'm actually not consciously thinking about it when I'm watching the movie, unless like there are some shots that are very obvious, right? I think in the end, it's just what matters most, I think, in a movie is just the storytelling and how well that's executed. But if you have something, if you can create gorgeous images with either format, I think in the end, these are just tools and for the filmmakers to wield in their movies, in their stories. So I like both, and I think I want to see movies shot on both. I don't know if I would want to see Tron Legacy on film, because it's like just the nature of that movie. It's in a digital environment. Like, you want it to look digital, as crisp and clean, as clear as you can. And same with like the follow-up from the director Joseph Kosinski. He did Oblivion, the Tom Cruise movie. That movie is a gorgeous looking digital movie as well. So like both formats can look amazing, and I think cinematographers have won Oscars for both. So I just hope that film doesn't go away, because I think the main reason for this debate is that the celluloid industry is dying, and so a lot of these filmmakers who we mentioned before, who support shooting on film, they've kind of rallied behind the industry, like Kodak Film, to try to keep it in business, to commit to shooting on film. Yeah. All right, so let's move on and let's talk about the main topic, which is the Matrix 4K debate. All right, Job, since you're the one who texted me and said you like the way the movie looks, why don't you start first?
Okay, Mike and I like to text each other about certain movies we watch. If something really stood out, we'll say, "Hey, dude, I just watched this film and it's so good. We should check it out." Or, "Hey, I just rewatched this and I feel so much better about it," or whatever it is, right? So, I know Mike loves The Matrix. It's his favorite movie, and to my everlasting shame, I didn't actually watch it all the way through until I watched it with him 3 years ago.
Yeah, something like that.
And it was in the middle of the afternoon between another movie, I think.
No, we actually were making a short film that day.
That's right. We were shooting our own film, so I was tired. We were developing the film negative in his closet. No, I'm just kidding. I was tired and I fell asleep to my everlasting shame. But finally watched it again because the 4K UHD came out, so bought a copy of that. Popped it in the other night, and let me just say, I thought it was gorgeous. I thought it looked so filmic. Yes, we just talked about what is filmic, but it ticked all my boxes. There was good refined grain throughout the image. The color felt natural and earthy. The skin tones looked natural to me. The effects were really well rendered. Everything just looked great. So I was like, innocently just went over to my phone and texted Mike and said, "Hey, I just watched the 4K UHD, and I know you mentioned you didn't like this transfer, but I thought it was great." And we had a bit of a discussion, very friendly, but a discussion nonetheless.
You awakened the beast.
Yes, apparently it even got down to like I went on YouTube and like screenshotted a comparison video of scenes and went like, this is this and this is this and look at which one's better, and then we just kept going and going. So I guess my point is, I thought the film looked great. This is from someone who didn't watch it in theaters back in 1999 and didn't watch it on DVD and didn't watch it on Blu-ray, but watched it like fully without falling asleep on 4K UHD in 2020. And so that's where I started from. And I did look it up. I did, after our civil discussion, I did look it up on the internet, and it appears that this 4K UHD transfer was approved by the Wachowskis. It was entrusted. They entrusted the mastering to their DP, Bill Pope, and they came to what's called a real, they corrected a lot of the issues they saw and some other fans saw in the previous transfers that lent themselves to an overly green tint in the Matrix and just unrealistic coloring in the real world as well. But I'm going to turn it to Mike because I think he has a lot of thoughts on this. So.
Oh, I'm boiling, man.
Here we go.
The itch is strong inside. I need to get it out. All right, so I've been watching The Matrix for 20 years. I saw it in theaters. I watched it on DVD a million times. That was like one of the first DVDs I ever owned, and I took full advantage of that. I wore that DVD out. My wife, who was my girlfriend back then, bought me the 10th anniversary edition of The Matrix. So this film is very personal to me. It has a very distinct look, right? All the scenes in The Matrix are colored green, while all the scenes in the real world are colored blue. And scenes in the construct, okay, this is where it's like a blank slate computer program that can load things like objects, environments, and training simulations. These scenes are supposed to look crisp and clean because it's supposed to be blank, right? My main problem with the Matrix 4K transfer is that it completely muddles the construct scenes. Instead of clean images, it looks like really bad color grading that I was referring to earlier in this podcast. Like someone took an Instagram filter and then cranked all the knobs all the way to max. So I've included some screen captures of this. So if you take a look, right, look at Morpheus and Neo's skin tones, right, in the 4K version. They're so pale. The highlights are blown out. They don't look natural. It's not their natural skin tones. Even the shadows are blue, which is not what the Construct scenes should look like. It's not even what the Matrix should look like. Scenes of the Matrix are supposed to be green, but they have bluish shadows in the 4K transfer. At some points, I think they overextended the greenness. I did look through other parts of the movie. It's not all terrible. There are some really great looking scenes that I thought was well done, but man, they really botched other parts of this film. This is one of the movies I'm really excited to show my kids when they're old enough, and I don't think I'm going to show them this version because this is not what the movie's supposed to look like. And like there's a quote from I think Bill Pope, the DP of the original movie, who you said oversaw the color grading of this version. He said that this was done on the 4K transfer to match the color grading of the sequels. And I think that there kind of summarizes, for me, the downfall of this project. Imagine if George Lucas had altered episode 4 through 6 to have CGI animations that match the CGI aesthetics of the prequels. Imagine if he did that. Okay, oh wait, he actually did.
Oh wait, he did.
Oh wait, he did. And how did people react to that? There are some films like Blade Runner that did not match the filmmaker's original intent. So there's several versions of that movie that has come out since then, right? So with a movie like that, I understand why the filmmakers would go back and alter the original film that was released in theaters, because there's areas that could be improved. But I feel like The Matrix and Star Wars, they're not like Blade Runner. They were cultural landmark moments in history, in cinematic history, and just in American history. And I don't think it's a good idea for artists to go back and alter masterful works of art, especially when they've been this way for 20 plus years. I think even if the original creator is the one overseeing these altered versions, it doesn't mean that it's a good decision. But in the end, the artist has every right to do what they want with their work. But in my opinion, I don't think it's always the right call. But this is just me talking as a fan of The Matrix, as a fan of Star Wars, as a fan of Blade Runner. Like, I understand, it's their projects. They can do where the heck they want. But, as a fan, as an audience member, I can choose to dislike. I don't have to like what they did. I don't have to agree with what they did. And I don't think it means that what they did was right. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like
I know what you mean.
Yeah. It's just like going back to the decision of shooting it digitally, but trying to make it look like film, whereas just shooting it on film, right? It's their choice, whether or not we agree with it, that's up to them.
Totally fair. And totally reasonable. I will say that I think a minor thing was, I think that the overbearing green tint, well, okay, this is what I read of some fans' opinion. Some fans thought that the Blu-rays and the DVD releases of The Matrix were overly green in The Matrix. Like, it was an overbearing green tint. Now, Mike says he likes it, so I'm not saying this is wrong, but this is what some people think. And they thought that that was done because the resulting movies, Matrix 2 and 3, had a lot of overbearing green to it. So they altered the original movie to look like the other two. Whereas originally it looked a little different. That's supposedly what they said. But I think I'm with you, Mike, on this, in that in the official press release or whatever for the Matrix 4K release, they were saying that Bill Pope, the DP, took advantage of the new technology like HDR and the full range of colors to create a version with color timing as it was originally intended, crafting a high-resolution digital master that is more accurate than the original theatrical release. That's where I agree with you. If it came out in theaters a certain way and it's a masterpiece, I feel like you owe it to not just us, the filmmakers, and again, I don't want to get into a debate about who the movie belongs to. Does it belong to the fans, or does it blah, 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 you know? But if you created a seminal landmark work and it came out a certain way in theaters, I think you're beholden to that, at least holding true to what you made back then, because technology back then allowed for you to create a movie like that, not a movie like it is now. Mm-hmm. So it's like revisionist history. It's like you said, with George Lucas taking the original movies, the original Star Wars movies, and adding CGI to it. You see a movie with like 1970s era prosthetics and puppets, and then you suddenly see a computer generated Millennium Falcon flying. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense because that movie is a 70s movie. It's not a 1997 movie. In the same way, The Matrix was a 1999 film. It's not a 2019 movie. And so, in that sense, I agree with you. But, that being said, on a subjective level, I do like what Bill Pope did.
Right, well,
like how it looks.
I mean, you like how it looks because, like, that's, like, the first time you've seen the movie in its entirety, like, awake and lucid. I would say, you know what, and you know, I'll confess, I just clicked and flipped through the 4K UHD one. I didn't watch the movie in its entirety.
True.
Because well, for one, I don't have a 4K player yet. I'm waiting for the PS5 to come out. Hopefully that plays 4K movies. Otherwise, I just wasted all this money buying 4K movies. Like, so I don't want to watch it streaming. I want to watch it straight from the disc because, you know, you and I both agree that it looks better when it's played from a disc. That's why you own physical copies of movies, for movies especially that you love. So I haven't actually watched the full 4K movie. I've only just seen some scenes here and there. And so, you know, I think both of us need to give the other versions a shot. Check out the 10th anniversary Blu-ray on... you know, with Movies Anywhere, it syncs to a bunch of different accounts, and depending on the account that you have with Vudu, Movies Anywhere, iTunes, it plays actually different versions of...
Yeah, I noticed that.
Of the Matrix. So that's where I got the screenshots from. I got some from Vudu, some from Movies Anywhere.
Nice.
Yeah. So, but I think in the end, you know... it's just the Matrix looks a certain way to me, and I think when I was talking to you about Star Wars, right, like you, like when we were talking about the Matrix for a while, I asked you about how Star Wars looks on Disney Plus, because I recently rewatched all the movies on Disney Plus to prepare for Episode 9, and I just thought the new color grading for episodes 4 through 6, it looks so dark and like drab, and I wasn't used to it, you know, because I've never seen the movie in that way, so I personally didn't like it, but you know, you like that version, right, because it reminds you of your childhood. It looks more closely to like the VHS versions, right?
Right. Yeah, it looks like see, that's the interesting thing about Star Wars is I first saw them as special edition. So I saw them before the original theatrical versions, which is crazy. I kind of watched it in reverse. So I watched the films with the CGI in it, but the 4K of Star Wars that just came out on Disney Plus, and that's coming out on physical this next week too, mirrored the 1997 versions. So it actually looks like what I remember the most, which is why it kind of appeals to me as kind of a more filmic, quote-unquote, look, in that it's the colors are a little more organic looking. George Lucas, speaking of revisionist history, with the Blu-rays in 2011 for Star Wars, he actually changed the coloring of the originals to look more like his prequels, so that it would look like a continuous story. The colors weren't like how they looked in the Blu-rays back in the day. They actually were earthier, but he corrected them so that they would all match together to match his vision, quote unquote, which is that he used a digital camera for episodes 2 and 3. But we're rambling a little bit now. It's just kind of interesting to talk about, like, well, the filmmaker thinks this is the best version of the movie, so we should accept it. I don't think that's true. I don't think we should accept it blindly and just go like, oh, whatever you say, George Lucas or Wachowski's brother, sister, whatever you are now. I think we can still be objective. We can still love the formats that we loved, but I do think it's a dang shame that filmmakers don't at least preserve the way the movie came out in theaters and give people a chance to watch it like that. Especially if their movie was like groundbreaking, like The Matrix would be, or Star Wars would be, or even Jurassic Park. We can go into all of these. I think Jurassic Park's 4K masters are super botched too. But anyway.
Oh, really?
I think we're about to enter a new rabbit hole.
All right. Well, actually, you know what? Actually, on that note, I just want to say that we have some ideas for other podcast episodes that we'd like to do. Job has mentioned before on this podcast that Jurassic Park is his favorite film of all time. I've mentioned The Matrix is my favorite film of all time. We're actually we want to talk about both of our favorite movies on this podcast. So that's another episode that's coming up. Nice. And we want to also, we've been talking about this for a while, but we wanted to watch all the films in a director's filmography and then kind of come together and just do a podcast analyzing a director. So we have an idea for a director coming up. We'll let that be a surprise. And there's a new film coming out on Netflix that the trailer was dropped last week or so.
Yes.
It's called Tiger Tail. It's about it's a Taiwanese American immigration story. So that one we actually were floored by the trailer, and we're actually very excited to watch it and talk about it. Please stay tuned to our podcast during this COVID-19 era. We do plan on continuing to talk about movies, and hopefully if you're bored or you're probably not commuting to work, so when you're getting ready for bed or something, if you want to put us on, we'll be grateful for that opportunity. So thank you for tuning in. If you listened, if you endured all this nerd talk about film and digital. Yeah. One more thing, actually, before we sign off. I really wanted to plug this app called Letterboxd, Letterboxd. Nice. Letterboxd, and it's a social media app for movie lovers, and basically you're just logging all the movies you watch. So on whatever day you log the movie, you give it a star rating. You can write a little blurb about it if you want to, and basically it keeps track of all the movies that you're watching, how many times you watched it, what ratings you gave them, and on Instagram or Facebook or any other social media, you have like a feed where you see what everyone's posting, but on this app you actually see what everybody has been watching. So I saw that Job watched The Rise of Skywalker last night. And I saw my friend Paul recently watch this movie or that movie, and this is what he thought of it. So
shout out to Paul.
Yeah, it's just and Albert, our friend Albert's on there.
Yep.
So and and a bunch of other fans. There's some really cool movie critics who are also on Letterboxd, so you get to see what they're watching and what they thought of those movies. Sometimes you read some really funny blurbs or reviews that people write. So I highly recommend it. It's just a fun way to keep track of your movies and other people's movies. There's a cool feature where you can create a list, and it's really easy to change the rankings in your list. So that's actually how a bunch of our film nerd friends, we actually manage our top 10 lists of the year, and we can easily change it back and forth, and we get to see what other people put for their top 10 movies list. So definitely check out that app. Job and I are both on it. Job, what is your Letterboxd handle? Do you know, or do you remember?
It's the same as all my other handles. It's Job Alex Ang, JOBALEXANG. You can find me there, Twitter, Instagram. I'm just gonna plug everything. Yeah, Facebook, etc.
Yeah. On Letterboxd, I am Mike H Tang. So please come find us, add us, and just let us know that you found us on the podcast. And we'll love to see you on Letterboxd. Until next time, stay safe, stay indoors, social distance yourself from others.
Amen. Cool. Thanks, everybody. Bye.